Hey channel, Fernando from SkyFi Audio. As an audiophile, you're probably aware of the resurgence of reel-to-reel machines over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. They're all over the market, and people are finally interested in the machines, and it's the market has reacted. There's a bunch of people restoring. There are some people trying to make new ones, and there's also a lot of misconception and confusion around it. I get tons of phone calls every month about people wanting to buy a reel-to-reel and not quite sure where to start. They just know they like the look of it, they like the thought of it, they just don't quite get it based on the questions that I received. So I thought I'd take some time. I've got in front of me an assembly of reel-to-reel machines from Technics. I got 4 models. And I noticed this the other day going through the shop. I'm like, wow, I think I've got just about every one of the more common models here in the shop, so it might be a good opportunity to make a video and go over the differences. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to spend probably around half hour. I'm going to go and fire these 4 machines up, tell you what the models are, what the different features, what a quarter track means, what half track, what 2-channel, 4-channel, reel sizes, bias, and you name it. We're going to talk about it all. I'm going to try to set the record straight for those of people looking to learn more about reel-to-reel machines. So hang in there. We're going to jump right into it. So before I jump too far into it, there are a couple of things to point out. One is I've got a couple of other videos with reel-to-reel machines that I've done in the past, and I'm going to link to them in the comments just below. I also want to mention our website, which is skyfiaudio.com, which you'll find every one of these machines as well as other ones for sale. And last time, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to understand which machines you like, what brands in particular, and whether you like them at half track, quarter track, and what sort of features you look for. So please share it with me in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I think a lot of the confusion stems from the fact that there are machines that are really meant for studio setting, and then there are other machines that are meant for home setting. And that can be a little bit confusing. And then even at the studio, they use multi-track machines for recording, and then they transfer the tapes down to smaller or less tracks. And that can add up to just a bunch of confusion. But this is what we've got in front of us. Really the residential, the sort of high-end residential or consumer machines, let's call them. But they're kind of like the high end of consumer, what we call prosumer. They're all Technics, Japanese brand that's been around forever. You guys are probably familiar with it. And although they look the same, especially these 3 machines, they're very different. Internally, they share a lot of commonality, but in terms of how they work, they are different. And the last machine I've got here on the far right is a super duped up custom version of a consumer machine from Technics. Now the rise of reel-to-reel it's been inevitable, right? We've got vinyl that came back roaring, and then people are looking for the next thing. Well, what's going to come next, right? Cassette decks have made an attempt at it, but they just don't sound great. The tape is just way too small, and it's hard to get really good quality sound out of a cassette machine. So inevitably we've landed now at reel-to-reels. They use a much larger format. The resolution is great, and I argue that it's much better than an LP. You can get tremendous results from a reel-to-reel machine, but there's limited access to material. A few companies have sprung out over the last decade that offer, somewhat direct-to-tape reissues of common, very popular albums from Adele or Diana Krall. You can get all sorts of releases now on reel-to-reel at a very high expense. I think a good quality release is going to set you back probably $500. So why would someone buy one of these machines? Well, for one, I recommend people that want to experience reel-to-reels that they just go out and buy a few recordings. You don't have to duplicate your entire library in reel or in tape. Just buy your favorite 5-10 recordings, buy a machine, put it on top of your system, and just enjoy the experience of playing with a reel-to-reel machine. Because for a lot of us, or at least for me in particular, it's about the music, but it's also about the experience of the equipment. I am an equipment file. I love stuff. So having a reel-to-reel machine in my system gives me a whole other layer of fun. I mean, look at these things. They just look so cool, and it's so much fun to push the buttons, thread the tape. I really, really enjoy that, and you can't overlook that. I mean, there is definitely a fun factor involved. But on top of it, we also get some really nice quality recordings out of it. I can take a a digital recording and transfer it to reel and add just the little slightest amount of warmth to it and actually get some really nice results from it. It's also for the person looking to maybe archive some of their more precious recordings. Let's say you've got a couple of LPs that are amazing and you feel bad every time you play it. Well, it's a good opportunity. Rather than go digital, you can actually put it on a very high quality tape. You can still buy tapes brand new from a manufacturer, very high quality tapes that are archival quality that will last for a very long time. So rather than wear out that precious record of yours, you could transfer it to tape and then enjoy it once in a while. So while these 4 machines are made by Technics, there are other really good machines out there at the consumer level. Akai makes a machine called 747, which I love. It uses a composite or ceramic recording and playback head, which lasts forever. They're audio reverse and really cool machines altogether. There are at least 1 or 2 on our website right now for sale. Revox makes a lot of great machines out of Switzerland. PR99 being one of my favorites. That's reasonably affordable. Pioneer makes something called the RT909 and the 707, which are really cool machines. And then Nagra Audio. Nagra is an absolute favorite brand. I love their stuff. I've got a T Audio in my house, and then I've got a Nagra 4SJ as well, sort of for backup. And we have both of those. I've got duplicates. So if you want to or curious what a Nagra machine looks like, go ahead on our website. Just search for Nagra. You'll see both machines up there for sale. And out of those, I'd love to hear which one you like the best, and why. What machine have you chosen for your system, and what really drew you to it? So what you intend to do with machine has a lot to do with picking the right machine. Whether you're going to focus just on pre-recorded material, whether you're going to get stuff that's made today, reissues like I mentioned earlier, or whether you're going to go on eBay and try to find some maybe original tapes from the 70s and 80s. And lastly, if you've got recordings, you've got some old recordings, maybe it was a hand-me-down from your dad or your grandfather, and you're looking to revive those. Each one of those scenarios warrants a different kind of machine, unfortunately, which are better suited for that specific purpose. So I'm going to take some time going over what the differences are and how you would essentially choose a machine. So first and foremost, let's talk about reel size. What you see here and what you're mostly accustomed to seeing is the 10.5-inch reel. This particular version here are aluminum, and not to be confused by the 7-inch reels, which are right here. I'll give you an example of that. Here's a 7-inch reel, and I've got a machine sitting just over here, a Pioneer 707 that's fitted with 7-inch reels. So if your goal is to go ahead and find pre-recorded stuff, like right here, we've got a Dave Brubeck quartet at Carnegie Hall, great recording. If this is what you're after, then maybe a Pioneer 707 is the right fit for you. It's more compact, it's less expensive, and it can do a beautiful job of playing back these tapes. But most of the real high quality tapes that you buy out there will be in the 10.5-inch format, just like that. Next, let's talk about the tape speed. This is where things can get a bit confusing. Most of the Technics machines come in 3 sort of consumer level speeds. So 3 3/4 is the smallest one, and that's generally reserved for use in spoken audio, surveillance, real slow playing tape where you absolutely have to maximize the amount of tape and sound you're going to get out of a recording. Now, if you double that, you end up at 7.5, which is a good speed for general purpose use. It's not the highest quality, but it's really a very nice, much better than a cassette was, and a real good challenge to the highest quality phono setup you can put together. And then 15 IPS, which is what we look for as an audiophile. We look for 15 IPS, that's inches per second. That's how much tape is traveling through the heads at any given point. This machine right now is running at 15 IPS, which is 38 centimeters in metric system. 7.5 is 19 centimeters, and 3 3/4 is 95 centimeters. Well, let me correct that. I just noticed that these numbers don't line up. So it's really, even though this label says it's 95 centimeters, at 3 3/4 is really 9.5. The decimal is not visible there. So from slowest to fastest is 9.5, 19, and 38. And in inches is 3 3/4, 7.5, and 15. Next, let's talk about tape size. Here we've got 2 examples. The lower one here is a 1/2-inch tape, and it really just measures 1/2 inch in width. And then we've got a 1/4 inch tape size. So a 1/4 inch can accommodate about 4 tracks worth of music, while a 1/2 inch can generally fit about 8 tracks. And it's important to understand the difference between channels and tracks. And the best way to understand channels is by looking at how many meters you got in the machine. Pretty simple stuff. Here we got 2 meters. This is a stereo machine. That's a 2-channel machine. And I'm going to dash over to the entrance here where I've got an 8-channel machine. This is a TIAC, professional. This is something you'd find in a studio or maybe in a recording, for a recording session. So we've got a total of 8 meters. 8 channels in total, and this is a 1/2-inch machine like I showed you earlier. For all practical purposes as audiophiles, we care about stereo 2-channel machines. Now tracks is how many sort of like lanes or in the highway you've got, and that's where the music goes. So on a 1/4-inch machine tape like this, we're able to generally record either 4 tracks or 2 tracks. And here we've got an illustration of both. So in a 2-track is where we just split the tape right down the middle. So we've got an 1/8 of an inch on each of the left and right channels. And that's where we use the most amount of tape with and get the highest quality. So there's no substitute for size in tape. The more surface area you use, the better the resolution, dynamic range, lower noise floor, etc. So this is when you split a 1/4-inch tape into 2, called 1/2 track. And this is what happens when we split into 4 channels, or 4 tracks, sorry. We generally use, we can do two directions, and this is analogous to a cassette. In a cassette, you remember how we sort of flip the cassette from side A to side B, where in side A you're playing 2 of the tracks, let's say the purple tracks, left and right channel, and when you flip the tape over, the head just lines up just slightly off, and it picks up the green channels for left and right. So 2 tracks versus 4 tracks. Now there's another variation with this quadraphonic. This was something came out in the 70s, I believe, where you would use all tracks, all 4 of them in one direction to give you front, left, and rear, front, left, right, and rear, left, right tracks. So now let's look at the different type of machines. And we're lucky that Technics makes all real 3 or 4 variations. So this will make it a lot easier to understand. On the far right, I've got a 1500. So it's an RS 1500. Made in the 1970s into the 80s. It's a workhorse. And it's got a beautiful tape path. I absolutely love how the tape is routed around these tensioners, the pinch rollers, down through one set of heads and then back on the other way around. They're super reliable, very well built. There's some accessibility to parts, and they're easy to work on, unlike some of the other sort of Japanese brands. So the 1500 is really the most desirable out of these 3. And why? Because it's a 2-channel, as they all are here, but they're 1/2 track, which means that we're using the entire tape in one direction to get the highest quality recording. So, and they're obviously they've got the 3 speeds that we look for. So its ability to play back and record is at 2 tracks. But it also has this magic switch on here that lets you flip it over and play back a 4-track recording. You can't record 4-track on this machine, but you can play it back. So that means that, when you pop in your audiophile tape, you play it on 2 tracks, and then you pick up an old tape from eBay, or you find some heirloom from the attic, and you're able to play back on 4-track. Otherwise, it'd be a mess. If you try to mix it up, play a 4-track on a 2-track machine, or 2-track tape on a 4-track machine, it's not going to work. You're going to hear deficiencies in one side, and things don't line up just right. So this is the most versatile one of them all. But it's not for everybody. I recognize that. If you're not going to be buying, brand new issue tapes, and you're not interested in creating the highest quality recording, it's more for just enjoying it, really the 1506 is going to be the one you want. Now it's the inverse of the 1500, meaning that we're able to record and play back at 4-track, and playback only at 2-track. So it's kind of like a nice sort of in between, a little bit more versatile in that sense. And you're not giving up a lot, because if you buy a pre-recorded tape at one of the new tapes, you can still play back in the 2-track switch position. Other than that, the machines are identical, and I actually believe the heads are interchangeable. So I think with a little tweaking internally and calibration and stuff, you might be able to pop out one of these heads and replace it. So what does that mean? It means that when you're playing back a 4-track recording, you actually can flip the reels over and hear side B. So, pointing at this machine, for example, you would play side A just like you see it here. The tape would end, and then you would reverse the positions of the reels and the take-up reel, and then play back, tails first. And that gives you side B of the recording. If it was just a 2-track recording, you play to the end, then you rewind, and then you play again. There's nothing on side B per se. That leads us into the third variation, which is the RS-1700. So I've loaded the tape on the RS-1700 so you can see what I mean about its basic auto-reverse operation. So here's a forward. I'm running slow speed right now. It's medium. I'm running at 7.5 IPS in one direction. And if I stop it, I can go ahead and press the reverse, which is essentially side B. And you can see the rules reverse direction and picked up right where we left off. So pretty similar to a cassette deck that has auto-reverse. You know, like a Nakamichi Dragon, for example. That'd be the best sort of comparison to it, but with a much wider tape with a lot more area for music reproduction. Now, because of that auto-reversing complexity, the RS-1700 is pretty different internally to the RS-1500 or the 1506, so it doesn't have as many interchangeable parts, and it is about a lot more complicated. It takes more electronics and logic to reverse and stop motors, etc. And then with the 1520, this is essentially the 1520 and its variant, which is a fairly rare version of this called the RMB, which is Radio and Broadcasting Edition. They look pretty similar. They've got slightly different features, but the 1520s are sort of go-to high-end machine from Technics. This one was done by Jay Quarter, our friends on the West Coast, that do a beautiful job not only restoring these, but kind of modernizing them, upgrading, and then making them sort of match our favorite brand of audio, which is Macintosh Audio. So this is essentially a tribute machine made to look like a Macintosh piece, so you can mix it with your system and get some bling going with a reel-to-reel. Because as you can see, the 1700 and 1500 kind of like come in this sort of Japanese battleship color. That is, it's cool, but it's not a great match for most people's systems, especially if you got Mac. So the 1520, it's got a ton of extra features. This one obviously has a ton of upgrades as well, but the main difference between the two are this particular panel here, this sort of record, reproduce, amplifier section in the middle. So this area here is not present in the other machines. Otherwise, the controls are very similar, if not identical. And this gives you access to some neat features. You've got essentially an oscillator. You can generate a reference test frequency at 1 kilohertz and 10 kilohertz. And then the playback equalization between NAB and IEC with this. That's essentially the way the tape is equalized for both European and American markets, which are slightly different. So if you've got a European recording, you're going to want to be able to play back in IEC versus NAB for our market here. Not a very useful feature. I wouldn't get this machine just to have that built into it, but it does give you other benefits. For one, it gives you equalization and bias adjust in the front of the machine. You generally have to go digging in the machine to get these potentiometers, but they're right here in the front for us. And more importantly, it also gives us balanced outputs, which obviously we love. Now this machine's been taken a little further. I've got a set of balanced outputs, but I also got direct head output. So there's been an extra head put on the left side of the machine that is wired right to these jacks that would allow me to connect a head amplifier and really take this machine to the next level. So, but that's not in every 1520, that's just in this custom piece that we had made for us. The balance ins and outs are right here for the machine, and if you look at the other siblings, we don't have that. We've just got conventional RCAs. So when picking a reel-to-reel, specifically from us, by Technics, you've got two avenues to go. We can source for you a really super clean, what we call a survivor, which I think is what this this RS-1500 is, which is, no, sorry, this one right here. The 1506 is an actual new in stock or new old stock machine that we found. Comes in a box, manual, every bit, still sealed in its bag. This machine has not been used. It was tested thoroughly, and you know, they survived time really, really well. So this machine was essentially unused. We checked it thoroughly, made sure it was calibrated, and it's ready to go out. We've had a couple of these new machines. We've been lucky enough to have them find us over the last year and a half. So this is the third sort of new old stock machine that we've come across. The other two are long gone. So that's one option for you, is to just give us a call and say, listen, I want the cleanest possible Technics out there, and we'll find you one. The other way to go is to just take your chances. You can go on eBay and find an RS, 1500 or 1506, probably for a couple of grand. The problem is that unless it's been serviced and gone through, if it's been heavily used, you're going to have issues with headwear. You're going to have issues with, the braking system not working properly, and you might need to buy one or two machines before you land a good one. And it's certainly an option. If you want to just experiment and have a good time, go on eBay. Find the nicest one you can find. Hopefully it has a return policy on it, because again, it might take you one or two before you land one that works well enough. And lastly, you can have one customized and custom made through us. You can call us and we can talk about the myriad of options that we've got. All sorts of really cool upgrades, not only cosmetic upgrades. As you see here, this machine has got the fascia refinish, it's got aluminum feet, it's got aluminum knobs and push buttons and levers. It uses bearings at certain positions along the drive line that are critical to reduce friction, modifications to the amplification inside, you name it. We can add direct head outputs. Really, the options are almost infinite, what we can do with a machine to your liking. And also, we've even had people send us a picture of their cabin and say, hey, get me something that's going to look the part, it's going to look amazing. We can do custom wood panels of different finishes and paints as well. So really, the sky's the limit as to what we're able to do with these machines. There are also some accessories you can get with these. It does have a wired input in the back for remote control, which is pretty cool. It's got like a 20-foot cord and a little box with buttons on it. There is an infrared option that we have one or two kicking around for. And you can put these on carts or trolleys, and then tons of options in terms of what sort of hub adapters you want to use. There are all sorts of really cool upgrades for the hub adapters and the take-up reels. To give you a taste of some Nagras, like I mentioned earlier, here are a couple of Nagra 4 SJs that we have prepared. This one has 10.5-inch adapters, so you can put a much larger tape. This would only handle a 7-inch tape at the time. And look at the precision work on these things. I absolutely love this brand. This is a machine from the 1970s. And here we've got a couple of them. And then over on the other side of the shop, I've got a T-Audio, which I mentioned earlier, which is their sort of stand-mounted, studio version. And this thing's a work of art as well. You see a Nagra Kudelski from Switzerland. Absolutely gorgeous machine. It's called a meter bridge up top. This is by far my favorite machine, probably ever. Lastly, before I mention the Kai 747, this is the silver variant. We also have these in black. They use LED meters with a cool door, hiding a lot of the controls. This is the one that uses synthetic heads or ceramic heads that we talked about. This is an auto reverse machine. It's got a digital counter for measuring the placement on the tape. And just two speeds. We've got 7.5 and 3 3/4. So if you're looking to do 50 IPS, this is not the machine for you, but a nicely made, fairly reliable machine. It does have motorized tensioners, which need attention. So I would avoid this on eBay unless it's been serviced, because these need attention every 10, 15 years or so. So chances are they're going to fail on you. On the shop, TIAC A3300SX. This is a great entry-level machine. You don't want to spend a bunch of money on it. You kind of want to play it and see if it's for you. This is fairly sort of standard machine from the 1970s. It's going to have 2 speeds, a low and a high, and this is going to be a quarter track machine, 2-channel quarter track. All right, so I hope that helped kind of demystify the world of reel-to-reels for you. I do encourage you to find a machine, if it's not one of these. They are a lot of fun and very rewarding in terms of what you can get out of them. I've even gone as far as taking sort of like digital playlists off of Tidal and put them on tape and just play them on the background while I'm working, which can be also a lot of fun to kind of take a little bit of a digital edge out of a recording. I appreciate you watching. And listen, I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes in this video. I'd love to hear from you. If you caught one, let me know in the comments and we'll address it. Our website, skyfiaudio.com. Our channel is pretty active. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video, and stay in touch.